Good evening, everyone. Greetings and love. I am Marcia from Gnoshery Libertas, and you are joining us this evening for Sanctuary, episode 44, the first in our next cycle. Sanctuary has officially been on air for a year now, and so there have been several members that have been here from the beginning and have been to every single sanctuary that has existed, including some of the ones that the hosts have not even been to. So I just want to thank you for your participation and how much it means to me that you are all still here a year later. Because that's a pretty big feat and a lot of time to offer up out of your busy life to be with us. And so, what is Sanctuary for those of you who are tuning in for the first time? This is a place that we gather every Monday evening at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time to tune into what I call Spirit, Holy Spirit, Great Spirit, the part of God that not only moves through us, that we can tune into and kind of respond to our life as with the wisdom from, but also the part that has this expanded perspective, kind of beyond what our linear minds are able to really grasp about what's happening in our life, what's happening in the larger collective sphere, and how they all interact in what you'll hear me call weave, which is Spirit's term for how our interior soul realms and even our realms of thought interact with the external realms outside of us and begin to really tell a story when we are present and paying attention. If you'd like to become a live guest, we'd love to have you on these calls. As well, you will be part of our private community and receive discounts on any of the one-to-one readings with Spirit. If that is something that interests you, you can check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/Gnoshery Libertas or on buymeacoffee.com/Gnoshery Cafe. You can also join me for support, for one-to-one support, that is, and transformation on Etsy now, etsy.com/shop/Gnoshery Libertas. So with all of that mouthful out of the way, I'm going to take a moment once again to set space with everyone on the call, and then I will be right back to talk about our light transmission tonight called Mystical Fusion. The reason why I had us come together in another moment, we always do a prayer before the call and after to create space, but tonight's energy coming through is that of primal fear. And some of us were talking before the recording started that we've been having these moments of primal fear coming up within the body. And it can lead to panic, it can lead to severe anxiety, making decisions from a place that is not supported. And so we're going to talk tonight about why this primal fear is coming up and also some of the supporting energies from Spirit. In fact, Spirit called this open contact, fluidity, fusion, and magic. And fusion, mystical fusion, being the theme tonight, this merging of different elements into a divine union or into a more divine union than how it is currently existing. And in order to talk about this mystical fusion, we have to have a polarity occurring. And that is where this energy of primal fear comes in. And it comes in through our reptilian consciousness, the part of us that is not necessarily coming from the conscious mind or from the logical place. It's coming from our DNA being activated at the primal or the core level. And what's happening right now collectively and on purpose, because it's leading to something meaningful, is that we are projecting our negative attributes onto everyone and everything around us, whether that be, people in the media, politicians, which I'm sure it's very easy to do right now, our family, our friends, just people around us, all of these things that are allowing us to kind of bring up these unprocessed and unresolved emotions and fears, these primal fears, Spirit says, which create illusion for the purpose of protection and survival, but which are not based in reality. And you will hear us talk on many of these calls that the reason for Sanctuary is so that we can kind of begin to move collectively and individually from responding from a place within our past where we're coming from an illusion of reality based on something that has happened to us in our past, but which is not based in our current reality. Now, of course, we can't always control how these primal fears come about. And so we're asked right now to look deep within ourselves for any of these fears that we have not faced, and to see how they might be playing out in the patterns or in the weaves of our lives right now, and to know that they will continue to threaten us until we confront and own them, as well as embrace them as a valuable part of ourselves. So this idea that we can outrun them or hide from them or deny them is, or even fight them, is really not the true reality with a capital R. We have to, in fact, turn and confront them and own them and embrace them and recognize that they are a valuable part of ourselves. In fact, the energy boost that we receive when we embrace them is something that cannot even be described in human words. And so this primal fear is an archetypal energy which highlights the most distasteful aspects of being human. And it's asking us right now to go through the collective and individual process of confronting our deepest fears, as only in doing so can we truly spiritually transform. So by confronting these fears, once again, this powerful force can be unleashed within our consciousness that then frees us from many old habits and patterns, not only in this lifetime, but also in any other time space where we are being and living as a soul. And so we're asked right now, can we walk into the unknown and face what we fear the most? Because this is what is going to be coming up right now through these cycles of primal fear. And they're coming from what Spirit calls the parallel. So not the past, the present, or the future, but the parallel, that which is beyond time and space. So it may not be logical. We may not have, a mental or emotional reason even to be feeling necessarily as intensely as we are feeling. And so just understand right now that it is not necessarily a personal issue. This is something we are collectively moving through, and just to be aware when we are projecting these negative attributes onto anyone or everything around us, Spirit says, and know that this is a way that we are working through these unprocessed and unresolved fears. As well, we might find this primal fear coming up in our dream time state. So if we're not experiencing it in our waking life, we may begin or may have already experienced it in our sleeping or dreaming life. So this is something to just be aware of, to kind of work within the energy of, to know that it's not personal. It's not, it might feel like our life is collapsing in on us in that moment. But when we understand that this is a collective unraveling, to release this illusion of protection and survival so that we can really return to the true source of our divine protection and thrive, rather than having to live in these lower levels of survival all the time. And so finally, the last part of this part of the reading were the lyrics, if you want to see a change, you got to love with your life. So it's not enough, to think about it on the weekends or to pray when we're in pain or in trouble. Our life has to be the living prayer. We are being encouraged to be able to be big enough. We have the capacity to feel this primal fear, but to be willing to move through it, to recognize that it is unprocessed and unresolved emotion. And if we look deep within ourselves for anything that we have not faced, we can, in fact, confront them, own them, and embrace them, which then, of course, as Spirit said, gives us this powerful force within our consciousness that can then allow us to move more confidently and boldly forward in our lives. Before we move on to some of these supporting energies that are going to help us move through this time, or these energies, this archetype of primal fear, I'd like to open up the floor or the chat for anyone that has a perspective they'd like to share.
Marsha, I have a question for you on this.
Absolutely.
Well, I have some of those fears, and some of them are so intense. They are paralyzing, and it's like my entire body locks up, and I feel like I can't even go there. So what would you suggest for people that have that kind of intensity with this stuff?
I think the first thing that we can do, is I know myself and a lot of people experience it as such, um, it does require, having some tools in our toolbox, such as like having some breathing techniques, having a place maybe we can go where we can, clutch something that brings us a little bit of grounding or anchoring, where we don't have to necessarily be on. I know that's not always available. Sometimes it happens, when you're out in the middle of public, and things like that. But recognizing that the body is having a true and legitimate response, and having compassion for ourselves in that moment, that it may take, fully feeling it completely for it to run its course. And we've talked about how, to the human experiencing that, can seem completely overwhelming and like it's never going to end. But often, within a minute and a half, we are able to kind of come back to center, at least a little bit, from those experiences. But when you're in the actual moment of it, which I think is what you're asking me, right when it's happening, is that accurate?
Yeah, like in the moment it feels, and when you were talking and you were saying it feels like it's never going to end, that's exactly what I was thinking and feeling.
Right. And it's almost like the only thing we can do is, if we have the ability in that moment, to remember, like, okay, this is part of the process. Like, I'm not dying. It feels like I'm dying. I'm not going to die. And do just any next right action to comfort ourselves, or to bring some type of anchoring to ourselves, even if that's like being compassionate with ourselves, to say, like, it's okay for me to completely feel this and feel like I'm not stable right now, and I don't have any of the things that I need. Like, I don't have to get out of this moment necessarily. So being very forgiving and gentle with ourselves, knowing that that's really the only way through it. There's no logical kind of way to move ourselves out of such a metaphysical space, because it's happening to the soul. It's not just happening to the mind or to the emotion or to the body. It's happening to everything simultaneously. And I think that's what's so overwhelming.
Thank you.
I don't know if that helps at all. Let me know if you have any other ideas that, or anything else that you want to share around that, because I definitely don't want to cut you off regarding this. This is a really, serious subject.
Yeah, I mean, it does help. And I do feel completely lost and like, am I doing this right? And I've got all these feelings coming up about how I'm never going to get out of this because it keeps coming up over and over. But I like what you said about the 90-second thing, because I have to be reminded of that constantly, because I forget, especially when I'm dealing with this kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have to keep reminding myself of it as well, because when you're in it, I mean, time does not exist when we're in those moments. We know that, when you're in a panic attack, or when you're in that paralyzed state of primal fear, you're not like 1, 2, 3, 1004. Like, that part of ourselves does not exist. And so it can feel indefinite. But if there is even just a blink, of the rational part of ourselves, or the compassionate part of ourselves, that can just say, like, I just need a minute and a half. I just need 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes away from everybody, or, in my car, whatever we need to do. But I have found, more often than not, if we can sit with it and we can give it, give ourselves the time and space we need, that the energy itself, while intense, can actually move through a lot faster than I think we would ever believe, when we're not in resistance to it anymore. But because it feels so bad, to the human, it's hard not to be in resistance. And so I think that's, where we have to really call on whatever snippet of ourselves is left in that moment, if we have it, to be the comforter, or to be the one that says, I'm just going to take a time out for 2 minutes, or whatever it is that we feel would be most nourishing to the parts of ourselves that are overwhelmed. Thank you for that question. I mean, it's a really deep question that probably can't be answered on this call, but at least can kind of open us to the fact that it is not forever, and it is part of a greater process that is actually helping us to shed some of these identities. But of course, that shakedown doesn't feel very good in the moment that you're experiencing it. Does anybody else want to talk more about the aspect of primal fear before we move on to the supporting energies? The next energy that Spirit brought through for tonight is this energy of what we are bringing forth from our future selves and this notion of open contact. The lyrics here, it all sounds unbelievable, but believe me, it's that simple. This open contact with Source, with our deepest of hearts, with what Spirit calls meeting an other. And, this could mean meeting another, like from other realms, coming into contact with one of our ancestors or one of our departed loved ones, or even a non terrestrial or metaphysical being. But it can also mean meeting an other in the sense that, wow, this person like really doesn't have the same life view as I do, or man, this person and I really have polarized perspectives on this. This is another way that Spirit is speaking to meeting an other, that we are required now to step into common ground, that it is only through finding common ground and no longer clinging to these limited perspectives that we will find humanity's success. So if we are still holding our arm out and saying like, oh my God, like, I can't believe this, or I can't believe that, regarding another or a belief system or a set of perspectives, we are encouraged right now to notice when we are making those life calls, if you will, and instead step onto common ground. And what Spirit calls into the unknown, that we are making a connection with a higher level of consciousness. So we're going to begin to see things on Earth change as more and more people begin to shed these denser energies, or they simply leave the planet because their souls are not in alignment with where the consciousness of the planet is going, which is this expanded, deeper, higher level of consciousness that allows us to connect with everyone and everything. And the most beautiful part about this consciousness is that we no longer then want to harm ourselves or another, because we can feel it at the deepest level as if we are harming our own soul, our own self. Now, of course, Spirit brings this back around to this facing our greatest fears. And we've talked, in fact, if you've had mentorship or readings with me, we often talk individually about this greatest hits timeline, this little phrase that Spirit uses to describe us going through bringing into this timeline that we're currently in all of the experiences that we've ever had from any other time and place. And some of these hits, being the greatest hits, like our best album, our best songs, and others being like our greatest hits, like, oof, these things that we have to overcome through connecting with this higher level of consciousness, which will allow us then to face our greatest fears. And one thing Spirit wants us to know right now is if we're experiencing this, we have everything we need within us to face these fears. So even though, oh, I'm going to hit a mic here. I think someone's got their mic on. Even though we feel like overwhelmed in the moment from these situations, Spirit wants us to know that no energy that is coming to us or through us is beyond what we are capable of not only controlling, but harnessing and moving through us. So we are experiencing transformation in this process, and we are opening ourselves up for deeper contact with Source. We're encouraged to pay attention and begin noticing the nuanced messages that we are receiving in our weave. So what is speaking to us? What is activated in our external life from what we might call the mundane or the details? And what are the nuanced messages that we're receiving? And beginning to write them down if this is somewhat new to us, because it will tell a story and it will bring us even closer to our own interior realms and to our personal intimate connection with Source. And so the final lyrics for this part of this reading of Open Contact were, "It's like I can feel the blessings coming my way." So even though we are dealing with this primal fear and the paralyzation of will that comes from this, Spirit is encouraging us to step out of our comfort zone, to think outside of the box, to meet an other, and to step onto common ground with someone or something that we may not on the linear mental level, find we have a lot in common with, but that it is only through finding this common ground and no longer clinging to our limited perspectives that we are truly going to find success. Before I move into the next supporting energy, I'd like to open the floor again. The nature of consciousness is to be fluid, and here Spirit really speaks to fluidity as being our magic wand through these denser energies. Life in a physical body often causes us to be rigid in our beliefs, our actions, and our emotions. But we're encouraged right now to practice going with the flow. Have a day without an agenda, or if that is overwhelming, an hour without an agenda, or even 10 minutes without an agenda. And to notice what comes up when we do not have a plan. What in our life changes when we do not try to control or manage our reality. This is not about becoming a victim or waiting for opportunities to fall into our laps. Instead, we are asked to surf the universal energy instead of trying to control the outcome. And as well to embrace change and to be okay with confusion, to know that confusion is simply clarity trying to point us in the right direction. But often we need to sit down and take space, mental and emotional space, in order to let go of this confusion. And of course, Spirit always reminds us to go outside, put your bare feet on the ground. Even just 10 minutes of bare feet on the ground every day will completely change our circuits and our ability to conduit this life force energy through our physical, mental, and emotional forms. So we're encouraged to remember that this is our natural state, fluidity, and it will be necessary for future success. And Spirit had me write this in all capital letters, that where we are going, the mind cannot keep up. As we move through these denser realities, we are going to experience a greater degree of suffering if we do not also remember our connection to source and our true fluid nature of consciousness. Tuning into this consciousness allows us to know the wisdom of each moment and increases our trust in ourselves and the greater divine plan. This fluidity is the means to end any suffering right now. So fluidity being this ability to say, I don't have all the right answers. This plan I have set up for myself is a nice outline, but if I cling to this, I'm going to end up in a world of hurt. And so Spirit acknowledges we are moving through denser realities, and particularly at the level of the parallel, where many times and spaces are converging into a single focal point in our now timeline. So as we are moving through these denser realities, we will experience more suffering if we are not willing to surrender the egoic mind and to remember our true connection to source and the fluid nature of consciousness that comes with it. Before I move into the final supporting energy, I'd like to open the floor one more time. We've got the archetypal frequency of primal fear coming up personally, collectively, and forcing us into this space of connection with source, this open contact, and kind of wrenching our plans out of our hands and forcing us to go with the flow and to move into the space of fluidity. And in our present moment, we are bringing forth the frequencies of fusion and magic. We're moving through a deeply polarized dramatic healing in which polarities fuse together to create a powerful energy that fuels our transformation. Whenever two forces collide within us or within our collective consciousness, the process of fusion releases an intense energy for manifestation. So once again, Spirit reminding us that in this surrender, this process of fusion, of bringing these seemingly polarized elements together, we are creating an intense energy for transformation and manifestation. This is the basis of what we call magic, the fusion of two opposite energies that is harnessed and directed in a desired way. It is important to embrace both our shadow and our light sides within us so that we have the quantum charge or the divine spark necessary to create magical transformation in our own lives and the world around us. And if you've ever been around a person who is tuned into that divine spark or that quantum charge, whether they know it or not, you will feel the electricity in the room. You will feel the magical transformation that takes place just being in these presence, these what we might call people with gravitas or great charisma, but those that are coming from an authentic and true place. Spirit reminds us that while this might be a volatile time for humanity, it also brings with it many miracles and transformations when we have eyes to see and ears to hear. Because the forces of polarity do not easily integrate, transformation happens through a very intense process. The example used in this card in the reading is that as we move magnets closer and closer together, despite their resistance to each other's energy, it coalesces between the magnets and becomes more and more pressurized. If the force that brings the magnets together surpasses the resistance, the energy created by the pressure initiates a type of fusion that collapses resistance, reverses poles, and suddenly creates rapid integration. This type of integration cannot be forced or controlled, but usually happens during a time of great resistance. So we are asked, what are we resisting within our own reality? We may be forced to surrender to the powerful force of energy, which is guiding this greater transformation. And we're also encouraged to notice any places where we might be in resistance to this change and growth. And if we continue to resist, we may find a lot of intense energy and chaos around us before this transformation can occur. So once again, letting go and following the flow, even if we think it may be taking us somewhere that we do not want to go, we're encouraged to trust that it is in fact taking us exactly where we need to go, and to trust this wisdom of the universe. Before we close out for the evening, I'd like to open the floor one more time. The unpleasantness of this archetypal frequency of primal fear coming up to greet us and causing us to deal with these unprocessed emotions, these unresolved fears, some of which we have carried in our soul DNA for aeons. And just asking from Spirit's perspective for us to notice any place that we might be projecting our negative attributes onto something outside of ourselves. And for us to take ownership and accountability of that. And as we embrace it, Spirit says, we once again get that boost of energy that is unleashed within our consciousness, which then frees us to move forward in ways that we previously were unable. And we're encouraged to be open to contact with our higher selves, with our soul, with source, with nature, with the all that is, whatever you want to call the frequencies of infinite love, infinite intelligence, infinite wisdom, infinite awareness. This contact is going to be what gives us the life force, the divine spark, and the quantum charge to move through these denser timelines with the fluidity and the flow of consciousness that we need to create the fusion and magic necessary for what Spirit calls the merging of different elements into a divine union. So even though it may feel heavy and dense, the polarities are there for a reason. They are there to create this confronting of energy, this powerful force, which then allows us to transform as a human species in ways that have never been possible in our past. Thank you everyone so much for being on the call tonight. I'm sure we'll have a lot more to discuss after the recording. Thank you to everyone in the chat. I'm seeing Mitzi, hey. And we will come back around again next Monday for the next Spirit transmission that wants to come through. So once again, this light transmission of mystical fusion, of being open to the primal fear because it is meaningful and purposeful, and remembering that the point of this is to initiate this open contact with our source, to live in fluidity and to fully understand the magic that we came here to create.